the French American Chambers of Commerce webinar to learn more about crisis management. We are going to allow 2 minutes to allow all participants to join us. In the meantime, I invite you to begin to share your questions in the chat window, and there will be some time for Q&A after the presentation as well. Thank you. Okay, I guess we can get started. Welcome, Vincent Geffray, for joining us today. So this information session is going to be about crisis management during COVID-19. This virtual event is organized by the French American Chamber of Commerce of New England. I'm Ludivine Wurksik, the Executive Director of the New England chapter. If you are not familiar with our network, the FACC mission is to support French and American businesses and foster a thriving economic relationship between France and the United States. We currently have more than 20 chambers of all over the United States, and we can be reached at our national website, nationalfacc.org. Before we start, I'd like to share some housekeeping items with you. This webinar is recorded. It will be made available after the live event, so it will be available on the FACC website and on our YouTube channel. The presentation by Vincent will be 45 minutes long and will allow 15 minutes for Q&A. By default, you are on mute. If you have questions, please use the chat window. And I will moderate them during the Q&A. Should we be disconnected, please reconnect with the link that was shared with you last night or today. Our speaker today is Vincent Geffray. Geffray is a Senior Director at Everbridge. And Vincent, I will turn it over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ludivine, for having me. And good afternoon, good evening, and maybe good morning, depending on where you are. So first of all, I want to hope that you're all doing well and that you're all safe. So like Ludivine said, my name is Vincent Geffray. I'm just going to give you a few words about me. I spent the last 20 years in the high-tech industry, mainly working with solution providers to help them bring enterprise software solutions to market. And for the past 8 years, I've been focusing on SaaS platform, which are software as a service solutions. Like Ludivine said, I am a Senior Director of Global Product Marketing with Everbridge, and I've been with Everbridge for the past 4 years. I guess some of you already know Everbridge because we are happy to count a few customers among the members of the chamber, including Sanofi and others. So you may know us because your company uses for business continuity, emergency notification, maybe crisis management, which we're going to talk about today, or to respond to major IT incidents. And for those of you who don't know Everbridge, actually maybe you do. If you, for example, if you live in California, in Florida, in New York, or Massachusetts, and if you receive public safety alerts from your state officials directly on your cell phone, guess what? There's a very high probability that Everbridge is the platform, the communication platform behind the scene, sending you those notifications. So very quickly, who are we? What are we doing? What's our mission? The company was founded in 2002, just a few months after the terrorist attacks in New York City. And since then, actually, our mission has remained the same, which is very simple, right? When something bad happens, we help organizations keep their people, their employees, their communities safe. And if there's any impact to their business operations, we're going to try to help them restore their business operations as fast as possible. We are headquartered in Boston, in the Boston area, with offices in Europe, but also in APAC. And happy to share with you that we opened our Paris office last year. So we now have a team in France. And today we have around 950 people working at Everbridge. We call them bridgers. And we have more than 5,200 enterprise customers across all industries, as you can see here, all verticals. I'm just going to name a few of our customers: Facebook, Amazon, Sanofi, I said Sanofi before, Biogen, Starbucks, Nestle, Siemens, Nissan, and so on and so forth. Since 2016, we are a publicly traded company, and you can find more information online. All right. So here's what I'd like to share with you today, what I'd like to talk about. So we'll start with a few definitions of what crisis management is all about, right, to set the stage. Then we'll try to understand why is it so difficult, why is it so hard for companies to deal with those critical events. We'll talk about what it takes for organizations to ensure that they can protect their people, their assets, and make sure that operations are running as well as possible, even during the most critical events. And I will, of course, use examples of what our customers are, how our customers are dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, but also we'll also talk about other type of critical events. I will then share with you some key takeaways and additional useful information for you. And last but not least, Ludivine and I, at the end of this presentation, will take your questions, and hopefully we'll be able to answer those questions. So let's get started. I'm just checking the time here. Let's get started. So what is a crisis? So basically, a crisis is going to be anything that is happening or is going to happen or is expected to happen, which is going to lead to an unstable and dangerous situation, which is affecting an individual, a group of people, a community, an organization, or a whole society, just like COVID-19 right now. And those critical events usually have, as you can imagine, negative impact on the security, the safety of the people, the integrity of the assets. Think about buildings, and also negative impact on business operations, productivity, production, but also revenue, right? And they open most of the time out of the blue with little to no warning. That's why it's not an easy situation to deal with. So what does it mean for a company, for your company, right? What does it mean? Which are the assets that you want to protect, right? They're going to be your people. You want to protect your people, your employees, your travelers, your contractors, your visitors, the people coming to your facilities. But that's also your buildings, your facilities, your factories, your data centers, your IT systems, your business operations, your supply chain, right? Might be outside of your building, right? And so you want to protect those assets against what? Well, there are lots of different types of bad things that can happen and impact those assets, right? And you have a list here. As you can see, two of them have been highlighted in yellow because these are the two I want to spend the most time on today. So when those bad things impact the things that you care about, your organization, your company cares about, that's when we are facing a critical event, right? And those bad things happen all the time. So it's not something that's, just going to show up once in a while. They actually happen very frequently. This is here a recent market study published by a company called Forrester with the list of the most common types of critical events. As you can see, top of the list are the natural disasters, extreme weather, especially if you live in the US, right? Hurricane. In a few weeks from now, we'll start the hurricane season in the south of the US. The wildfires, earthquake, snowstorms, tornadoes, but also IT failures, cyber attacks, utility outages, and so on and so forth. So you see there's a bunch of different critical events that can impact your people, your assets, your operations. And you might be going through the list and realize that, oh, we're not talking about COVID-19 here or a pandemic. And the reason is this research was done a few months ago, and people couldn't predict that we would face this black swan event, which is the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Black swan, why? Because it has impacted almost everyone on the planet, every government, millions of companies, forcing hundreds of millions of people to work from home when even possible, right? And as you can imagine, those critical events are extremely costly and deadly. They're costly to the economy and the businesses, right? So I have a few numbers I'd like to share with you, just to show you how big the problem we're dealing with here. So the estimate for the most frequent events is about $480 billion every year. And this year, if you consider the COVID-19 crisis alone, the estimate done by the United Nations at the beginning of March was already around $2 trillion just for this one. And since then, those numbers have been revised. And last time I checked with Oxford Economics, the numbers they had was close to 4 trillion. And they estimate that this is going to cost 5% of global GDP this year. So as you can see, this is huge. Now, these are the challenges that companies are facing, right? There are so many bad things that can happen. Should they be physical, like a natural disaster, like a physical security breach, weather-related disruption, or they can be digital, an IT system outage, network outage, application performance issue, a cyber attack, and we're going to talk about cyber attacks later on. And that can be very difficult for companies to be always aware of what may happen, right? And make sense of what's happening so that they can trigger the appropriate response plan. And what's even more challenging for companies is that most of the time, those critical events, they come in series, impacting different sides of the business. So it's not like for every company, there's going to be one person, one department responsible for all the crisis management, right? Because it can impact the different sides of the business. If we consider COVID-19, the first concern for every company, for everyone, even for government, has been protecting the people's safety. And very soon after that, we've seen a huge disruption in the supply chain, right? And if you remember, it started with factories shutting down in China, right? So production stoppages in China first. And then this was coupled with almost a general shutdown of international shipping. We couldn't send goods overseas from country to country. And at the same time, so that's why you see here on my screen, blinking blue, disease outbreak, that's the COVID, and then the repercussion was supply chain disruption. And then almost at the same time, we've seen a surge in the number of cybersecurity related incidents. And I will tell you more about this particular use case in a few minutes. But first, let's try to understand why is it so difficult for companies to deal with those type of bad things in order to what? Protect their people, assets, and operations. So if we look at everything that can happen, like these are examples here of what can impact a company. For most organizations, the process of managing those critical events is still extremely manual, with disjointed processes and teams, siloed organizations, and it can take a very, very long time just to walk through the crisis. So why is that? So if you go by the book, the first thing that an organization needs to do is to be ready, right? Is to be ready, have the plans in place. And it needs to be in a situation where they are aware of what's happening or what may happen. Again, from physical standpoint or digital standpoint. So physical security issues, hazmat, man-made disasters, weather, digital disruption will be a cyber attack, a ransomware, a system failure, and so on and so forth. Then they need to answer the very difficult questions. Do we care? Should we care? Why does it matter? Why is this thing that's happening matter to us, right? So that's a very tricky question, right? Should I do something? So let's say we can answer the question and decide that yes, there is an impact on the assets, people, operations, and we need to react. We need to respond. That's the third phase in the process where we're gonna have to decide what we want to do. And you'd be surprised, but many organizations, even today, still have their response plans in physical binders, that you see here in the picture on the phase number 3, which, as you can imagine, are not very easily accessible, especially if you're working from home, right? And they might be outdated. In some situation, you need to reassess the situation as the crisis develops. And COVID-19 is a very good example, right? Almost every day there's something new. A new quarantine, a new lockdown, or some countries are reopening, and so on and so forth. So the map or the context of the crisis is changing all the time. So therefore, you need to be able to correlate almost in real time what's happening with your people, your locations, your employees, which means you need to take into account data from different systems, from your HR systems, right? From your travel systems, from your building management system, from your physical security systems, and so on and so forth, to paint the big picture and give you all the data so that you can make data-driven decisions. And once the incident is closed and you are almost back to normal, then best practices say that you want to look at how we did, right? What happened? How can we improve the efficiency of the response we gave to this crisis? So this phase also may involve after action reporting. Some of your companies may be under certain regulations where they need to report even outside of the company on what happened. For example, if you are being attacked through a cyber attack, it's most likely that in your industry, you have to report to the FBI if you're in the US. Same if you're in Europe, you're going to have to report to one of the European Commission agencies. Okay, and why are we doing all this? The clock is ticking, right? And the more time it's going to take, the greater the impact on the people, the assets, and operations. And at the same time, the more we wait, and the fewer options will be available to us, to you, in your response. So now let's consider COVID-19. So let's consider the COVID-19 situation. So just to show you how difficult this can be. Companies, to make sense of what was going on, had to collect data about the evolution of the contamination. And then, like I said, correlate this information with their locations where they have people, they have buildings, they have offices, they have operations, but also might be interesting to know where you have suppliers, because if your suppliers are impacted, maybe you might be impacted just because of the fact that your suppliers are impacted. And from there, assess the situation. So the question comes here, what data do we want to collect? What data do we need to collect? And looking at COVID-19 maps can be overwhelming, because basically when you look at this map, for instance, because I didn't put any particular filter, it can be overwhelming because everything is red, right? So how do I know which information is relevant to my company, to my people, to my locations? So what data? Can we trust the data? What data are you going to trust, given the fact that people go online and there's a lot of fake news, there's a lot of fake information, there's a lot of information that you don't want to take into account, right? So that's about the data. Then, should we care? How can we, as an organization, make sense in a timely manner of the impact on our organization? How do we assess the impact? So what should we care? And then from this, what are the plans that we want to trigger? So like I said earlier, to protect their employees and residents in response to the pandemic, the first thing that happened a few weeks ago for some countries, a few months ago for others, and it started with China, has been to declare a lockdown. So governments have declared lockdowns, and therefore companies had no choice but to send their employees home, right? Like most of us right now. And most of these companies, so that was the response we gave to protect the people. Again, that was the number one objective at the beginning of the crisis. And so most of the companies did this. But what's interesting is most of companies didn't even anticipate that sending people home by hundreds of millions would create a second wave of critical events. And they would also have to respond to this. And that's cyber attacks. Just so you know, since the beginning of the pandemic, cybersecurity experts said that the number of cyber attacks have increased by more than 500%. And that's since the beginning of February. So the question should be, why? Why are we seeing this surge in number of cyber attacks? It's pretty simple when you think about it. We now have hundreds of millions of people working from home, which means they have to access the corporate resources and the corporate systems from home, just like if they were working from the office, right? But they're not in the office. They're not working on a protected internal network. And many companies were not ready for that. Many companies didn't even have a BYOD policy, a bring your own device policy in place. Companies are using VPN. As some of you may know, VPN is very old technology that's overloaded and outdated. Companies didn't have the time to make sure that every laptop, every device was free of malware, or that someone who is trying to log on to an application remotely is the person they say they are, right? Another reason is the fact that remote workers have been asked to use collaboration tools, which they didn't use before. Who today doesn't use Zoom, right? We are using Zoom for this webinar right now. Zoom, the company, they've seen an increase in data usage of more than 2,000% when compared to the beginning of February. And talking about cybersecurity, Zoom as well as a company, they also experienced severe security breaches to the point that some organizations have decided not to use Zoom any longer, right? And they had to issue patches and fixes in the past few weeks. So the best protection against those threats like this is to encrypt and secure all the devices and the connection. And you also want to put in place multi-factor authentication, which is the second form of authentication, so that even if someone steals your password, they still don't have access to your account, right? But again, most companies were not ready for what's happening. So that's the very interesting point here. COVID-19 has proven to be the cyber criminals' best friend, and the pandemic presents the perfect opportunity for them to exploit human weakness. You've got millions of people looking all day long for information on the internet to try to make sense of the situation. And it's very easy to be lured in by scams pretending to provide this information that you're looking for. They use different tricks, right? Fake websites, phishing emails to steal credentials and make their way to your corporate systems. We've read stories about kids using their parents' work computer at home, because everybody's at home right now, and download something on the internet, allowing criminals to break into the company's network, ransomware the entire organization in less than 4 hours, and shut the entire company down, right? That's how critical and how quick this can happen. So now that we are aware of all the bad things that can happen, we need to organize the response, right? According to, hopefully, a recovery or response plan. I'm just sharing this information also with you, especially if you're in IT, HR. 90% of cyber attacks begin with spear phishing emails. These emails, these malicious emails, where criminals are trying to get you to download something or click on a link. So again, we're now going to respond, which means get a clear understanding on who's impacted. We need to understand who's impacted, what location, in what location are our people. Maybe that's a specific location, a building, a geographic zone. Who can help in some situations? You are going to want to include a team of first responders, a crisis management team, so that they can actually activate the response plan. And there will be a third category of people that we need to keep updated. And that's going to be your senior management, your executive at the company, but maybe your key customers, your key partners, or some third-party auditors, especially if we are facing a cyber issue. So let's consider the COVID-19 response. And since I'm going to assume that we are done with the lockdown, at least for now, and the most important work for organizations is going to be to organize the return to work, right? And let me tell you, for most organizations, returning to work is not going to be as simple as it was to get everybody locked down. It is going to be a journey. And these are some of the challenges with regard to the return to work. Companies need to take into account that there are changing conditions all the time, locally, but also around the world. And this consideration will be based on the evolution of the number of cases. Look at France right now. France is trying to reopen their economy, and they've already divided the country in two regions, the red and the green, with different rules that apply. So you need, as an organization, if you have people, employees, offices in both regions, you need to understand what it means for you. So evolution of the number of cases, country of residence. We see in Europe, especially, that the rules are different if you are a citizen of a particular country or if you're not. The rules are different if you are if you are technically in the Schengen area versus if you're not, right? So as a company, we need to take this into account. We also need to take into account different regulation at the national level, right? And I'm thinking, since I believe everybody here is interested in the French case, there are regulations in countries like France where you can't collect data, all the data you want on people, right? So you have a agency called the CNIL, for instance, that regulates what companies can collect in terms of data, even though this is for the safety of their people, right? So we need to take this into account. And because at one point, as we know, when we reopen, there's going to be new clusters of contamination. There's going to be new production stoppages. There's going to be new impacts. There's going to be new travel bans. There's going to be, or the regulation is going to change, new supply chain disruption, plus everything else, right? I talked about the hurricanes, the flooding, fires, IT outages, and all the other bad things that can happen, because, you know, believe me, those critical events are not going to wait until this crisis is over. So you see that every layer of management needs to be involved in the process, right? And they need to share the same operating picture. Whether you work in HR, human resources, whether you are with the you work with the head of manufacturing, with the chief risk officer, with the chief security officer. You might be in business continuity. You might be working for the chief information officer, the chief information security officer. But even legal departments, your corporate communication have to be involved, especially when it comes to returning to work or cyber attacks, for instance. And like I said, this is not going to be a switch, right? Because we might be in this situation for at least 18 months or more until we find a vaccine for that. Now, so what do we do? What do we do to keep our employees safe? So we might want to be able to reach out to all our employees and make sure they are safe using wellness checks, right? Asking them if everything's fine, if they need anything, but also preparing the return to work. Asking them, are you comfortable going back to the office? We are going to reopen a production line. Would you be willing to be on a shift, right? Can you actually come back to the office? We know that depending on the countries, depending on the regulation, some schools will not reopen before September. In other countries like France, some schools reopen last Monday. So, and in other regions, people have the choice to send their kids to school or not. Now, if your employees still have to take care of their kids at home, maybe they cannot go back to the office. How do you keep track of this? How do you know that, right? You might want to be able to send all your employees a very easy way to get access to the company resources related to COVID-19 and return to work, what they can do, what they cannot do, and any kind of resources. Notification incident zones, that's a way for you to automatically tell your employees that they are entering a lockdown zone. So for instance, I was taking the example of France with the red and green zones. Automatically, employees entering the red zone would be notified that they are entering a zone with different rules that would apply to how they actually work. There's a lot of discussion around contact tracing, and basically that's the ability for a company to know where, at any point in time, where are their employees, contractors, visitors, and be able to send them targeted notifications so that they can protect them better. And these are a few examples here of things that a company is going to have to track to make sure that they are on top of the changing conditions. Quarantines, know where there are quarantines. You have to know, as people are going to start traveling again, you have to know where they can go, where they're not allowed to go, depending on a lot of different considerations, citizenship, where they live, and so on and so forth. Production stoppages as we have new cases, new lockdowns, and the local regulations. Can I travel to Europe right now? Yes, no, and under what conditions? So with this, talking about responding, we also need to be able to plan for what's going to happen. We know we're going to find new cases, new COVID-19 cases, right? As we reopen the economy, right? So we need to be able to send notifications to all. Let's say there is a new COVID-19 case that has been identified in an office. We need to be able to send targeted notification to all the people at this location, but also would be a good thing to be able to send notification to people who have been in this location in the past week or past 2 weeks, for instance. Send notification to people, to employees that have had planned to come to this location in the next week, for instance, so they can make changes to their travel arrangements. In case we declare as a company or a country declares a new lockdown, same thing here. You want to be able to notify the usual employees at this location, but also employees that have planned to come to the location, right? This is where declaring a lockdown zone is also helpful for anyone that would be entering the zone and would receive automatic notification saying that, no, this zone, there is a lockdown here and you're not supposed to be in this area. So this is for protecting employees in the context of the return to work or in the context of COVID-19. Now, remember, we still have to deal with the cyber attack, right? So let's go back to the cyber attack now. So, as you may know, if you have friends or if you work in IT or in the business continuity department, that dealing with cyber attacks is not an easy thing to do. Already on a normal day, it's challenging to prevent the cyber criminals to get to your corporate, to get into your corporate systems. But with everyone working from home, as you can imagine, this is even more difficult, right? Why? Why? Because the first thing you want to do when dealing with cyber attack or ransomware attack is to ask all your employees who are connected on the corporate network to disconnect, right? That's the first thing we want to do. But how do we do this? So that's the who's impacted. Who's impacted? We want all employees to unplug. How do we do this? Are we going to send people an email? Guess what? They're receiving already hundreds, if not thousands of emails every day. And we've taught those people, hey, be careful about emails you receive because you don't want to click on malicious links. So again, sending emails when communicating with your people might be challenging in some situations, especially if you need people to take immediate actions. Plus, they might not even receive your emails before an hour or two because they might be homeschooling right now, right? Now, who can help? We need to identify and mobilize as soon as possible the right team of experts. And it's not as easy as calling into your security operations center anymore, right? We're not on a normal day. Depending on the nature of the incident, the application, the response might be different, and the team might be a totally different group of people, and they might be spread out all over the world right now. So how do you know who they are, where they are, how to reach out to them? What information do you need to send them so that they can make sense of what's happening? So what information do you want to send? What information are you allowed to send, right? When it comes to cybersecurity, you don't want to say anything, crazy. You don't want to say that, oh, my company is under cyber attack. You don't want this to be communicated to the public. So I have to be very careful. So just as a information, because we don't have time today, I would love to dig into the reasons why almost 60% of organizations are struggling with their response to critical IT issues, but we don't have time. So I'm just going to share with you that while we are dealing with an IT issue, the average cost to the business, to your organization, is around $9,000 per minute. So if you do the math, yes, we're talking $500,000 per hour. So that's one of the reasons why your IT department wants the time it takes to fix issues to be the shortest as possible. And once we're done with dealing with the crisis, and hopefully we were able to go back to what we call the normal state of operations, we're going to want to understand what we did and how we can improve over time. So that means it will include collecting the operational information about the crisis. Sometimes for compliance reasons. Sometimes for compliance, we have to store information. For example, if you're in the financial services industry, by law, you are required to keep record of everything that happened during a priority 1 incident. You want to review what went well. Want to review the lesson learned. We want to understand what we could have done better so that we can improve over time. And again, the idea is practice, have a plan, practice, so that next time it's going to be easier. So in a nutshell, this is what companies need to do when dealing with crises. So a few takeaways that I wanted to share with you. Maybe where to start. Identify and locate your mission critical assets. Again, for your employees and your people, it might be pretty straightforward. Now for your supply chain routes, for your business operations, for your critical IT systems, may require some digging. Be prepared with plans in place and practice. And again, a plan is not a work document that's sitting in a closet. Have a communication plan ready. Very difficult when you're dealing in the middle of a crisis to put together a communication, especially if you need to send information to your CEO, to your shareholders, to the board. Automate the tasks that can be automated. Companies, organizations are wasting a lot of time just doing tasks in processes that could be automated. Know what's happening or may happen. Don't be paranoid, but be aware of all the different things that can happen. And again, look for improvements to improve efficiency and effectiveness. So I think this is already a good start. Now, if you'd like to learn more about this topic and maybe about this very situation that we're all going through about the coronavirus, Everbridge is hosting a free virtual summit next week on Wednesday and Thursday. As you can see on the slide here, we'll have some very well-known keynote speakers, starting with retired USA General Colin Powell next Wednesday, and the day after on Thursday, former FDA Commissioner, Dr. Scott Gottlieb. Another area that which I didn't really mention, but Everbridge is also helping governments and states and organizations protect their residents and citizens, and we have an easy way to do that. It's by texting a keyword to a very simple number, 888-777. It is free. The service is free to you, and will allow you to receive directly from your state officials public safety information. So I'm going to share on this slide here a few keywords depending on where you are. If you live in Atlanta, San Francisco, New Orleans, so on and so forth. If you're like me and live in Massachusetts, you just want to text COVID-MA, COVID-MA to 888-777, and you will receive information and notification directly from Governor Baker. So I hope that you've learned something new today, and if you'd like to continue this discussion with me, this is how you can reach out to me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, direct email address. And with that, Ludivine, I think we have a few minutes for questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Vincent. We do have a few questions. During your presentation, you mentioned a lot the importance of anticipation. What about the companies that did not have a plan or plans? How can you assist them, to take measures as the crisis is happening?
Yeah, so that's a really, really good question, and I believe that a lot of organizations have found themselves in a situation where they didn't have a plan, right? Again, COVID-19 is a pandemic, so it's a black swan. It's something that is happening right now, and we hadn't faced something like this in years and years. So when I say have a plan and be ready, for most of the critical events, we know they're going to happen. Let me take a very simple example. IT issues, IT outages, cyber attacks, we know they're happening. They're happening every day. They are impacting our business every day. If you're in HR, if you're in business continuity, if you're on IT, of course, you need to have a plan to respond. For example, if you are, and again, when I say cybersecurity, it's not an IT issue, it's a company issue, right? So if you're in legal, HR, or corporate communication, be prepared means know what you're going to say when it happens, right? When you have to communicate with the board, with key customers, key stakeholders. Don't be in a situation where you're in the middle of the crisis and you have to craft an email or a press release in the middle of everything, because it's going to take so much time just to get it ready and then get it approved before you can even communicate. So that's what I mean with the plans. Now, there are also plans like, and again, this is going to depend on what industry you are in. If you are in chemicals, right, you have a plant. You can, in case of a industrial disaster, have a plan so that people know what to do when this happens. And usually you have drills. So again, anticipate means think about your response plan, think about your communication plan, and think about who is going to do what at what time. And if the question was about how can we assist as a company, yes, we can, and we are a solution provider, and there are also companies that can assess from a best practices standpoint.
So we understand some of your clients are cities, are states, are countries, and many of them are also companies. Could you speak about the profiles of the companies that you serve?
Yes, that's a very good question. Like I said, Everbridge's mission is the same, whether it's for government or a private company, right? Keep people safe and businesses running. So yes, we have a range of customers, starting with the biggest one, countries. Australia, the country of Australia is a customer. Sweden, Norway, Peru are customers. In the US, state of California, Massachusetts, New York are also customers. So in this case, the people we're going to be working with are going to be the emergency departments, right? Or the Ministry of Interior for countries. Now, we also have large multinational and companies, and in this case, usually we start with the chief security officer, the chief risk officer. But now with COVID-19, we see a lot of HR departments being at the table and being involved. We also work a lot with the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, the Chief Information Security Officer, when it comes to everything related to IT issues, to cybersecurity issues. So again, this is a global concern for companies, and what we see is more and more companies are taking a unified approach to dealing with all these kind of critical events, as opposed to having each department deal with their own incidents, if you like.
Thank you. And so maybe a last question, Vincent. So could you be more specific about your solution? Is it more like a software, a platform? You mentioned, sending texts to employees, to people.
Yeah, that's also a good question. And again, I didn't explain what the solution was. So that's right. Everbridge provides a platform and different solutions depending on the different type of incidents, right? So for return to work, for COVID-19 return to work and contact tracing, it's going to be more of a mobile application that's going to be used, but sitting on the platform. For IT, we have another interface, but again, this is the same unified platform. And depending on the response that is required to deal with the different incidents, we are going to provide different tailored solutions.
Thank you, Vincent, for sharing your expertise with us. So Vincent is available by email. We can also share the contact information in the follow-up email we will send to you in a few minutes. I would like to share some information about our other upcoming webinars. We are on a pace of one webinar to all. We have a questions from a participant. Will we be able to share the slides with participant, Vincent?
Yes, I don't see why not. Yep.
Okay, so we'll do. So we have a few upcoming webinars in the upcoming weeks. I would like to mention a special discussion with former ambassador of France to the United States, Gérard Haro, on May 19th. And specifically our May 27th event on supply chain in the times of global disruption and disease. And you said it's very, you mentioned, Vincent, our supply chain is very impacted during this COVID-19 crisis. So we will interview the head of global supply chain of Millipore Sigma on May 27th. Thank you very much for your attention. This event has been made possible thanks to the support of our members and sponsors, and we hope to see you very soon. À bientôt.
Thank you.
Merci.